everybody, and welcome to this week's podcast episode of the Pet Loss Journals. I have a wonderful guest with me this week, Dr. Faith Albright, and Faith is going to talk all things home euthanasia and also a special relationship that she shared with her dog Hope. And I think that we'll start there. Faith, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing well.
Oh, that's good. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd love to, I suppose, start with Hope, your
Yeah.
gorgeous dog. And I think if you let us know what your first impressions were of Hope, how did you meet? How did it all begin? Share with us.
Yeah. So I worked at a shelter in San Francisco and I was lucky that it was a shelter that had a very high live release rate, meaning the only animals we had to euthanize were those that were so far gone mentally or physically that there was no way to rehabilitate them.
Mm.
And Hope uh, wasn't in that category, but she definitely had a lot going on even when they found her abandoned in an apartment for a week with no food or water. And we didn't know her history, and she was already blind and had glaucoma and uveitis. So her eyes were very painful and already blind.
Oh gosh.
But she came into the vet office for her kind of checkup and how to um, assess what she needed. And all she wanted was to cuddle. Like she just wanted to be pet, and she was quiet and nervous, but she
Mm.
just like leaned into that affection so much. And she was old, like we guessed around 10 already,
Mhm.
and had not been spayed. So we did the surgery, the vet office of spaying her and removing her eyes that were just painful and not sighted anyway. And she had a really bad limp already, like walked funny. So she had arthritis, and it looked like her legs had been broken and traumatized over her life. And they kind of knew at the shelter that we wouldn't be able to find a rescue for her. Like the typical old dog rescue had already said they were full. And we weren't going to euthanize her, but it looked like she might sit there for months. And I talked
Mm.
to my partner at the time, who actually is from the UK, lives there, and and said, like, can we just foster this dog for a little while? Like, I'm sure she could find a home. And I brought her home, and within 5 minutes of meeting Hope, my partner was like, we're keeping her forever. Like, she's not going
Oh
anywhere
yeah.
else. So, and she stayed like that, just this like sweet, quiet, like she barely ever barked. She was just the sweetest. She was a pit bull, but so gentle.
Mm.
And she was the first being of One Living Sanctuary because she came to us before we actually had the land for the sanctuary in the last few months that we were living at our house.
Mm.
And then over the first 5 years, the past 5 years that I've been starting the sanctuary, she was just kind of the sanctuary's mascot. Like she was the first one everyone would meet when they would come to volunteer or do a tour, and they would fall in love with her. And she was also a wonderful um, advocate for different abilities because
Mm.
people have this story and would project on her, oh, it's so sad that she's blind. And I'm like, she's not sad. If you look at her body language, like she was so happy and she just loved people and had an amazing 5 years. And
Oh.
then last year in November, the cancer that she'd been kind of battling for several months finally like got the better of her. And on her last weekend, we invited like so many people that she had loved over the years to come and say goodbye to her and kind of honor her and do this going away party. And everyone just fed her as much as they wanted. And she just had an amazing, like, kind of celebration of life over the
Mm.
past, like, the weekend. And then we let her go. And so Hope died 3 days after the American election.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Sounds
it
like she's
was
touched a lot of people in her life.
It was beautiful. We had
Yeah.
this outpouring of just messages to support like
Mm.
her. And it's hard. Like I miss her and have done a lot of like work with grief after losing her.
Mm.
Because there's not going to be another dog just like her. And I hear that from clients all the time. Like, I'll never meet another one like her. And I'm like, you won't, but you'll meet
Mhm.
other wonderful ones. And so
Mm.
just this sweet, touching, like poignant grief, but like knowing that it was all good and it was all worth it, like the
Mm.
love. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
I can
she was
imagine
beautiful.
I can imagine that the two of you would have faced challenges together. Like how did having her in your life kind of support you through life's challenges, would you say?
Um, Yeah, she was one of the like really amazing stable things as I was recovering from a lot of like personal trauma. And then
Mhm.
that, tipped into a lot of like even collective trauma over the pandemic and over wrapping out the first Trump era and then like moving into the new one of just like this unrest that's happening globally that feels so raw and poignant. And the clients I have hope did the same thing for me that a lot of their pet friends are doing for them of just being this solid touch point in the middle of so much unrest and so much insecurity. And it's this little being that we can come home to, and that relationship is at least consistent. So
Mm.
yeah, we did that for each other a lot. Like I promised her to provide her a place of stability and security. And so she saw me through a lot of breakups, and I saw her through a lot of people coming in and out of her life. And
Mm.
um, yeah, it's been really solid and sweet.
Yeah, I can imagine how heartbreaking it was then when, when she left this world basically, and with all the change and the upheaval and the uncertainty and the overwhelm that's happening at the minute, it's just like that's when we can miss them the most. Would you agree?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I took up a lot of like spiritual study and
Mhm.
a mix of like self-help and Buddhism about 10 years ago. And it kind of got me through what personally has been like the most traumatic period of my life.
Okay.
And it's been culminating into this like really beautiful solidness over the past few months, even with all of the global turmoil. So it's been sweet to be able to provide a little bit more of an anchor to the clients when I go visit them from a
Mm-hmm.
personal place of solidity
Yes.
in the groundlessness, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. It feels like you've been on this journey for quite a while now, and even it may have helped you to process grief, and it just
Mhm.
sounds like you need that kind of support, even to support clients, which is a difficult thing to do emotionally, I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Like I listen to a lot of spiritual podcasts and
Mm.
self-help books like Tara Brach, Radical Acceptance, and Pema Chodron, Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change, or When Things Fall Apart. And being able to ingest that and live it and feel it in myself helps me to speak from a place of personal uh, knowledge when clients are grieving and feel like the rug is pulled out from under them and they don't know what to do anymore.
Mhm.
And so I can tell them like even personally, like I've gone through periods where I didn't know if I was going to make it or I hit rock bottom or I didn't know how to get out of this ocean of grief. And
Mm.
through things that sound as cliche as like gratitude practice. And I've
Mm.
been using that a lot to come overcome the grief of hope.
Mhm.
Because every time I think about her and I just feel lost in the, like she licked our dishes, for example, before we put them in the dishwasher.
Mhm.
And so after every meal, when we'd finish, we would put the plates down. And so for a month, like finishing a meal would bring tears because I'm like, hope isn't here. And it was
Yeah.
this like this feeling of loss and a depth of grief that I'm like, I don't know. And then I twisted it just a little bit into gratitude instead of all the plates that she licked over her life. And imagining, I'm like, she must have licked like a million plates in her lifetime. And just that little tweak of like, rather than she's not here,
Yeah.
instead into like, wow, we got to give her so many like happy moments and she gave us so much joy,
Yeah.
lightened it for me and let me see the appreciation of what was rather than
Mm.
the grief over what isn't.
Yeah. Wow, that I'm sure that your explanation and even sharing that with us will help anybody that might be struggling with that. Even it's the small things that we miss. It's
Yeah,
just the greetings when we come home, or it's all the
totally.
small things that just add up that we can't, that's at the forefront of our mind. And then to try and just change that narrative a little bit to that gratitude, that can be so helpful for anyone listening. So thank you for sharing that, because that's like a personal little gem of
Yeah.
info that you shared. But I would love to hear a little bit more about Hope and maybe her funny quirks that she had, or maybe some interesting or really funny situations that kind of you particularly stick out in your memory. over the years that you've
Yeah,
shared with
yeah.
her?
So she, like one of her, we said that she was really into deconstructive artwork
Oh,
because we would give her ice cream containers, same thing. Like she was so food motivated.
hmm
And so when ice cream was finished, she would grab it and again, totally blind. And she had a really good sense, like a mental map of the house. But
mm.
when she got something she was really excited about, like her nightly toothbrushes, like those little greenies, or an ice cream container, she would get so excited that she couldn't think anymore. So she would just like barrel headlong into things. So we'd have to like guide her and like, careful, 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 like as she was like going to her chew spot.
Oh,
And she would go there with this like spring in her step enthusiasm, even though she was a senior, and just tear into it. And she would rip apart the whole like ice cream container carefully and meticulously into these perfect little confetti shreds and like spread it all over her chew spot. And just the level of delight she had. Like I love that about dogs, how they just bring so much joy into such mundane, like daily activities that
mm.
it teaches me to greet life with that level of enthusiasm and joy.
And they're always
And
like in
then
that present moment, aren't they?
totally, yeah, exactly. I know that was the other, like in my Buddhism classes, they would talk about how humans were the best, you know, it was the highest thing to be uh, born into a human world. And I'm like, are you sure? Because like
Mm.
the animals, I know, I'm like, we have to study for years to get back to where they're already at every day of
Yes.
just
Oh my
being
God. Yeah.
here and enjoying every
Mm.
moment. And I think that for so many people, definitely myself, like hope was a constant reminder of like, I can just be here sitting in the sun. I can just be here
Mm.
enjoying this meal, and I
Mm.
don't need to be thinking about anything else.
Mm. Such an
And
important
then she would
lesson.
also have like this crazy enthusiasm when going outside to the bigger yard. Like she was always allowed in the house yard, but when we would open the gate, like she knew all the sounds. So the gate would open and she would just spring like a jack in the box, like from the gate and just start barreling forward, like running at full speed, even though, again, can't see anything. And she was just like, yes, she was such a yes to the world. And it
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, every time we would open the gate, she would just like run out full speed and it was hilarious. And then she would like throw herself on the ground in the mulch and like roll and have this big lolling pit bull grin on her face. And like just, yeah, the level of sheer delight was pretty magical.
So magical for a dog that had no sight. And
Yeah.
obviously, I can imagine when you first brought her home, was it really difficult to for her to navigate the place? Did it take a lot of, supporting her? Was that must have been tough for you and your partner to kind of navigate that, or had you experienced before of that, like an
I
animal
had
without
never
sight?
had a blind dog and I was really worried about it. And she taught us a lot and handled it like it was more of her teaching us how to deal with it
Mm,
rather than us teaching her.
mm.
And we were fortunate to come upon a thing called a halo for the blind dogs, which is like a harness that it looks like a basketball hoop that surrounds their heads.
Okay. Yeah.
And with that, they are able to walk like full speed through the world and and navigate in a way that even if they run into something, it's just the halo itself bumping something rather than their head bumping it. And it
Okay.
gives them a level of confidence. So when she first arrived, we had that on her a lot.
hmm
And she was able to wear that and walk around full speed with the confidence that she would like run into
Oh,
a
yes.
like that it would like protect her face.
Okay.
And so she got to wear that while she was learning first our home in Oakland and then when we moved our
hmm
home on the sanctuary. And she was so brave. So it was this like first we had this idea like many people like she would be not capable of living this normal dog life. And she actually taught us that not only was she capable of it, but my gosh, she would sneak away. And I would feel like such a moron when I would lose a blind dog. Like we'd be talking for a moment and
Yeah.
like turn our back when we first moved to the sanctuary and we turn around, we're like, where's the blind dog? And she's just gone and like exploring and like tromping around the hill or something. We're like, oh no, we lost the blind dog again. But
Oh my God, it was like a running joke then.
yeah, oh,
She was
totally.
running
Like,
away,
yeah,
hiding
she's
it.
just going to explore. She's like, okay, I'm off. And like she'd go to explore and like, yeah, sniff all around. And she had this great like snorting sniff and would just like delight again in like
Mm,
exploring the world. So she wasn't afraid. She was fearless, even though her world was dark. And she also taught us a lot, and we would pass it on to other people because they're
mm,
like, how does she get around? And humans rely on their sight so much.
mm.
Dogs are already more smell than we
Yes.
are and
Yeah.
probably like equal with their sight. But then we would tell people like, shut your eyes and start slowly navigating your space, and you notice how much your ears perk up and
Mm.
smell and feel, and you can feel like the breezes and how they change if there's a wall next to you or a tree next to you or a car, and how the sounds bounce off differently. So she would almost use like sonar sometimes. So we learned
Wow,
to like
that is
snap for her. So we would like snap and she would follow the snap and also follow it from not bumping into things.
wow, that's mind blowing. I actually never even
Yeah,
thought of it like that, but that is
right. Yeah,
amazing. Yeah. So all of her other senses was like increased by 100 times
totally.
just to kind of she navigated perfectly then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's
And like
incredible.
I had a blind cat once too, and like you couldn't tell he was blind. Like we went 2 years without even knowing that he was blind because his eyes looked normal, but he
Mm.
he was a blue-eyed Siamese, and they can have sight issues at times. And
Oh
he
my
would
God.
track birds through the sky because he could hear their wings.
Oh wow.
And it took us a while, and a vet pointed out, it was before I was a vet pointed out that he was blind, and we're like, no, he's not. And she's like, he's totally blind. And like she showed us like these little tests, and we were mind blown. But yeah, it's
Wow.
that just like humans, and I think a lot of people with different abilities would
Mhm.
attest to that of like, a person who's neurotypical or a person who has all their senses
Mhm.
in a quote unquote normal way doesn't appreciate how there can just be differences in how we perceive the world. And it's not that one is better than another.
Mm. Oh, I totally agree. No, definitely. I I know that you mentioned that you had a lot of you kind of created this kind of life party at the end of Hope's life and tell us a little bit about how you personally kind of got through the loss and what helped you personally because obviously grief is completely different and unique for everybody, and there isn't any set timeline. It's not linear, but everybody kind of processes it or gets support in different ways. So for you personally, how I know you said you were very spiritual and that helped, but whether,
Mhm.
if you're comfortable to share anything else that kind of helped you to process the loss.
Yeah. So with her and with other grief, like recovering from personal traumas that I've gone through, or again,
Hmm.
like on a global scale, just the collective grief that happens when there's a lot of turmoil happening in the world. I am deeply empathic and so get really affected by that too.
Mm.
So whatever it is, one of the big things I've learned for myself is just allowing the feelings.
Mhm.
I've in the past struggled with my own sadness or anger when it comes up. And anger is a normal part of grief for a lot of people.
Mm.
And that can show up sometimes in a feeling of like self-flagellation for a lot of my clients. They go into this like, I wish I could have done more. Or at the end, they say to their companion, like, I'm sorry. And I hear that, like, I'm sorry I couldn't stop this from happening, or I'm sorry that I couldn't do more. And it's heartbreaking for me to hear that, even though I resonate with that both as a companion of animals and as a doctor,
Mm.
because there's this feeling of like, I wish I could save them from what? From death? Like we all die.
Mhm.
And so it's been a gentle analytic and intellectual unpacking of that of like, am I trying to fight grief and like having or fight death and having those conversations with myself about it. And what I got to, what I have like relaxed into is grief feels frightening to me because it hurts so much. So there's part of my brain that says something must be wrong. I should fix this feeling rather than
Mm.
just being with it. And when I stopped trying to fix the sadness, when I stopped trying to fix the death, when I stopped trying to fight against it and just leaned into it and accepted it,
Mm.
it comes. It comes in waves. It came when we first found out that she had cancer back, again, about a year ago, I first found out that she had cancer. And I knew that our time was coming closer to an end. So like to let those waves of grief come when they come, and I'd be perfectly fine and see a healthy pit bull puppy and feel like I'm not going to have her for very much longer, and allow that sadness to come out rather than like holding it in and feeling
Mm.
that knot in my throat just to cry. And I have the blessing of being with people in grief every day. And I say blessing because I think it's so healthy to let it out in these like little teeny doses, to just like tap into that internal sadness and just let it come out when it
Mm.
comes. I'll watch movies like Collateral Beauty is a good one from a while ago, like within the last 10 years, that Will Smith is in, and they talk about grief and it's really well done. So just movies or songs that have me cry. I have a grief playlist when I really want to lean into it and just like let
Mm.
it out. Um, Being in nature
Mm.
helps a lot. Like, so just like being in a forest helps me to get back in touch with like how, like the life cycle and the cycle of like birth and death, and how it's all kind of continuous and there aren't really starting and stopping periods, and to tap into how interconnected we all are, even
Mm.
when they are quote unquote gone, like that nobody's ever really gone, that it's all just one continuous cycle.
Mm.
So those are some of the big tools that I have of just feeling it, accepting it, not fighting the sadness or anger, but just noticing them for what they are, not getting lost in the story when
Mm.
those feelings come up, but instead just like dropping the story, like noticing the thoughts, like it's not fair that she's gone, or I'm never gonna like see her again, dropping those words
Mm.
and just feeling the feeling.
Mhm.
And that helps me like allow it and for it to pass through rather
Mm.
than staying in a mood state.
Mm. I definitely
So those are
resonate. Yeah, I feel
yeah.
like I've spent many years fighting the grief. Both of my dogs died in 2019, but I spent nearly 3 years fighting that until
Hmm.
the way you described it was just beautiful. It's the way you described it is kind of what I let happen. I eventually, felt my emotions and let it come to the surface, the lump in the throat. I let it come up and
Yeah.
out, and it just felt
Yes.
amazing. It just felt incredible. And I think we spend so much time suppressing and pushing it down, probably due to judgment, shame,
Hmm.
all of these
Hmm.
things that people feel. It's a disenfranchised form of grief, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
I think the way you describe it is just beautiful, and hopefully others can maybe learn to kind of let go of the story a little so that they can feel the emotions come up and out. And
Yeah.
that's what's really important. It's obviously very difficult. But I
And
appreciate you
it
sharing that, yeah.
yeah. And the I think especially when the connection feels like a soul connection, a lot of people describe it like
Mm.
with their pet friends, but also with humans.
Hmm.
And um, I went through a lot of, again, personal trauma in the past 10 years. A lot of that around romantic relationships, and like went through a divorce with a 20-year relationship. And
Okay.
it when I talk to some clients, I think that the fear around feeling the feelings is it feels insurmountable. It doesn't feel possible to get through it and be okay.
Yes.
It feels like this ocean of grief. And like if the like my story was, if I allow myself to feel that at all, I'll drown in it
Mm.
and I won't
Hmm.
ever come out the other side.
Mm.
And to be gentle with oneself in that state, because like I didn't let myself feel it, like you were saying, for 3 years you're
Mm.
kind of struggling against it, and I went through a similar with my divorce. I couldn't really feel it for like 6 years. It took me a long time.
Mm.
So to just be patient of like, maybe you can feel it 1%, in one day, and like the
Yeah.
next day you can
Mm,
feel it maybe 3%, and to
mm,
just be gentle with myself in that process of like, to the point where one day I trusted I'm going to be okay if I just grieve.
mm,
And I'd read an article about like letting the earth have our grief,
mm,
and I went and just sobbed like a toddler on the ground, on the earth, and just like in the grass, just like cried and let the earth hold me, and let the, like, felt the gravity literally and figuratively of, there's this big collective place that we can fall into. That like, I'm not falling apart, I'm falling together, and it's
mm,
okay to cry like this. It's okay to like let my heart shatter.
mm,
And it doesn't mean that my heart is now gone or broken forever. It's, these days feels broken open. Like
mm.
every time I grieve, there's more space for compassion. There's more space for love. There's more space for understanding of others that are going through these processes.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I get that visualization of just letting the earth soak up that grief.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I love that. When you mention your clients, share with us a little bit about why you kind of chose to go down that road and why you were passionate about home euthanasia and offering the kind of that service and support to your clients.
Yeah. So it actually weirdly started with the sanctuary in some ways, and
Mhm,
in other ways, looking back over my life, it feels like if there is destiny, that it was always predestined for this to be my life path. Uh, my mom is a therapist, and so I would say it started even then. And I don't remember there being a period where I was afraid of death. It was always in my sphere. It was always in my awareness, and not in a frightening way or even a devastating way. It was just so normalized and naturalized.
mm,
And I think I credit my mom a lot with that. So when I became in my young 20s, I wanted to help the world as much as I could, and decided with my then husband that we would have a farm animal sanctuary. And that was a 20-year plan, and why I went to vet school. So I was gearing towards the sanctuary always.
mm,
But then in vet school, I started even then getting all of the difficult euthanasia cases kindly handed to me by my colleagues, because the other students didn't want to deal with the emotion. They were
mhm,
overwhelmed by it. And
mm,
very early on, I got this reputation for being good at it. And so I sat with people in their grief. And I've had a lifelong journey of um, an obsession almost with self-help and personal growth and spirituality. And so being with people when they are raw and real feels so much more authentic and nourishing than the typical superficial interactions that
mm,
our societies in the West offer us with each other. And so I was able to just be with them in their grief, not take it on as my own, but have this deep empathy and give a space where they could just feel it completely.
mm.
And so it felt nourishing to them. I got feedback that it was really helpful to many of the people that I saw, like how I showed up. And it was something that offered the flexibility I needed for when I did start my sanctuary 5 years ago, is when I got into home euthanasia full time.
Mhm.
And so by then I'd done private practice, and I didn't like how so much of the end of life care in America for pets feels like it's more about the clients not being able to let go than the patients actually being like happy and benefited by that.
Yeah.
It felt
Mm,
like it was just dragging out the inevitable in a way that I didn't feel ethically good about.
mhm.
And then I went to shelter medicine, and that was emotionally challenging in so many ways. And then got the sanctuary in 2019. I started it and moved onto the land. And it is beautiful. And we have now 150 beings living on the property. And um, it's mostly farm animals, so horses, cows, pigs, chickens, ducks.
Wow.
It's called One Living Sanctuary, and it's amazing, but it is a money funnel. It like drains all my money. So I still needed a different
Mm,
profession to make money. And
mhm,
I loved home euthanasia and the intimacy of being with people and their pets in their homes.
mhm.
And the euthanasia stayed something that I was really comfortable doing, and there was
Mm,
such a big need for it. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And the relationships I form, like I tell people, I fall in love every day, like every appointment I have. I just go in with this open heart of like, I am here for all of you. I'm
mm,
here for the patient, and my patients look universally exhausted and ready.
yeah.
They are like tired in their bodies, and
Mm,
people, have so much conflicted feeling in themselves, like, are they ready? And I can now just like feel them energetically and confidently like reassure the people, like, they're so ready, they're
mm,
so tired, and like
mm,
they know that at some level, the people know that,
mhm,
and that's why they made the call. Like, it's not a call people make lightly, but having that reassurance, and like, it's never a lie when I tell people like
mhm,
they're ready. It's like I feel it from the animal, like they're accepting of death, they're accepting of the end, and they're just tired of a
mhm,
body that's not working for them anymore.
mhm. Wow. Yeah, I think the compassion and the empathy that you show your clients and your patients, it's what creates that kind of safe kind of connection that people feel that yes, this is the right thing, and it can bring people
Yeah.
relief. I'm assuming
Yeah.
with your expertise, your support, and that comfort as well. That's
Yeah.
and then your big passion of one living sanctuary. It's just 150 animals. I'm amazed. Wow. And the fact that you said it was a dream for 20 years was like, wow, blew my mind. Like obviously this is something you've wanted to do for a long, long time. And like where did
Yeah.
that kind of initial passion spark from to have the sanctuary?
It was wanting to give back as much as possible for one human life. Like, I'm a recovering perfectionist and just wanting to do
Mm,
everything in the world, but knowing that there are limitations of time and
mm,
energy. Um, and my then husband and I were vegetarian and went and visited a farm animal sanctuary
mm,
and went vegan right away when we learned about the dairy and egg industry, and that it
mm,
is every bit as violent, if not more, than the meat industry. And realized that for every person who stopped eating meat and went plant-based, that alone saves about 100 animals a year. And we're like, this is how we can do the most good. Because
mm,
even if it's not all the way, like, and that was the other piece of it, honestly, was bringing a humanitarian flavor into the animal sanctuary world, because there's a lot of people in animal rescue and advocacy that have tilted over into hating humans. And
mm,
that's not the answer either. We're like,
mm,
humans are also animals, and
mm,
there's a place that we can come to each other from love and empathy and kindness and compassion, rather than coming from a place of like us, them, and vilifying and
mm,
shaming people.
mm,
And at the sanctuary, we talk about like wherever you're at with like your own personal like plant-based journey, if
mm,
that's giving up butter for one of the new plant-based butters on the market, great, go there. If it's
mm,
having meatless Mondays, awesome. If you're vegetarian, wonderful. If you're vegan, great. It's like that there are 3 meals a day, and people can make that choice every day. It's not
mm,
about a label. It's
mm,
about doing what you can to like help.
mm,
And so there's just approaching it with a gentleness that we didn't see. So that was where the idea came from, and that we would be able to help the beings on the sanctuary, but that the main point was outreach and education, where people can come who have never like scratched a pig's belly and like hug a cow and scratch a pig and
mm,
interact with chickens in ways that they never have been able to. And we
mm.
wanted to give that back to the world.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true because there are people that have never even touched an animal if they're coming from the
Yeah.
city or they just it's just seems so like, oh, you've never I grew up on a farm and even for me it's like, oh, you never, touched an animal before. So there's lots of people that just never have. So it must be amazing. And I think the way you speak is about like people hating the people, but it's so much more than that. And I think if you can
Mhm.
bring people together for education, it's amazing to do that.
Yeah.
And where do
And
you,
it
Oh,
they
go ahead.
all, like the sanctuary and my
Mm-hmm.
home euthanasia business and my spirituality, the common like thread, there's a couple like our compassion and loving kindness, they call that in Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also a flavor of, and I had a friend that pointed this out to me and I hadn't really seen it. He's like, your whole life is about consent. And like you're advocating for consent in the world, and
Mm-hmm.
that like these animals didn't consent to be eaten, or like
Mm-hmm.
that even the euthanasia is like there are things worse than death, and like suffering is worse than death, and that we want them to go forever, but it's like we can't, and people are, they get so afraid of like I can't ask them if they want to pass, and I'm like, but we're already keeping them alive
Mm-hmm.
unnaturally long, because in nature they would have starved to death, or they
Oh,
would have
yeah.
been picked off by a predator.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this weird like learning how to try to live with animals in a way that like how do we ask their consent.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sanctuary too, like we can read body language, and like the clients that are making that choice to let their pet go, they don't know it, but they are intuitively reading their body
Mm-hmm.
language, and the animal's body is saying like I'm so done. So
Mm-hmm.
they are getting consent, but it's this like intuitive consent.
Ah, yes, yes. Wow, yeah, I never thought of it like that, and I've never heard anybody, share that or speak about that. But it's so simple, but it's so true. It really is like it's a fact that, and a lot caregivers and pet parents, they know their pets the best, and they often
Yes,
can, like their intuition can often tell them a lot of information, and they may just second guess themselves. But then with you, they're
yes,
giving that kind of gentle support and kind of expertise that you can kind of relieve them of that burden of them
yeah,
overthinking things. Yeah, yeah.
totally. Yeah, I actually saw a client today in the grocery store while I was just getting groceries, and it was like a couple months ago that we helped her pet pass.
Mhm.
And she was smiling and hugged me and said like this was the best passing that she'd ever had with this pet, and
Mhm.
that she didn't ever think about it with regret and sadness, that she just felt a sense of relief and gratitude for her animal's life and her life together with her, and for the passing itself, and how that like relief of suffering. And that's what I hope to give to people, is just that peace of mind of like you didn't do anything wrong, and
Mhm.
it's okay to say goodbye.
It's so okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the sanctuary and
Yeah.
where do the animals, how do they get to you? And obviously you have people visiting and maybe you do some educational work. Tell us a
Hmm.
little more about it.
Yeah, so we have at the moment two other people that live on the sanctuary full time that help me with animal care,
Mhm.
especially since I'm out of the house a lot doing the vet work.
Mhm.
And it is, yeah, just every different kind of animal: cows, horses, pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys. Like we have one really aggressive male turkey, Odie, which is
Oh.
he's kind of funny. And we have a giant black rooster and named Freddie Mercury. We name our roosters
Oh,
after famous male singers. We have a little rooster named Elton John. We have
oh,
like
brilliant.
um, and so it's a place where people can come volunteer.
Mm.
My intent is that it more and more be like a community meeting space. It's been slow to get off its feet in that regard because of COVID happening simultaneously, but
Mm.
having things like potlucks, which we've done a couple of times, things like clothing swaps, or just like where we're bringing the community in. We have a big Halloween party every year,
Oh,
and
wow.
get the community to like out and meet each other
Mm.
and to meet the animals. And there are volunteers that come from the community. They're all ages. Like we get kids as young as like 10 years old coming to volunteer with their parents,
Mm.
and people that are well into being seniors and everything in between. And they'll come and just be really surprised at the relationships they form. Like a lot of them will come for the cows and they have a story that they want to be with the cows, and then they form an unexpected bond with the chickens.
Mm.
Um, and so the animals come from sometimes animal advocacy groups, sometimes activists will have a relationship with a dairy and they'll get like a cow that was slated to be a veal calf.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll get people that work with some of the egg industries and they'll get the layers when they've reduced their amount of laying at about 18 months old, and they would normally be sent to a slaughterhouse at that
Okay.
age, even though they can live into their teens.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll be able to like divert a couple of those chickens for
Mm-hmm.
us. And sanctuaries are not the answer to like save all of these, because just in America alone, we kill over 18 billion land animals a year. And it's
Mm-hmm.
mind-boggling,
Oh
that number.
God.
So we can't rescue all of
Yeah.
those, but
Mm-hmm.
we can rescue a couple
Mm-hmm.
and then help people make more educated decisions about knowing where their food comes from and knowing if they want to be part of that industry.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
so
that's the
important.
intent, and that's
Yeah.
where they come from, is like
Mm-hmm.
kind of all over. We had a goat that was wandering the streets of Richmond. We had a pig that was loose in San Francisco. We'll get 4-H, that's in the US is um, a, or Future Farmers of America. It's these programs where they give students a baby animal and
Mm-hmm.
have them raise it to market age or weight,
Mm-hmm.
and then want them to sell it at an auction. And some of the students fall in love with their animal and don't want it to get slaughtered at that point. And so they'll come to us begging, like, please, like, rescue my animal.
Mm-hmm.
And we will agree as long as they don't participate in that program any longer.
Okay.
So we don't want to be like a revolving door for them, but
Yes, I see.
we have one cow and one pig that came from that program. So they
All
come
right.
to us through also, I get calls every day, and like learning to say no was one of the hardest things about
Wow.
the
Yeah, that must have been
sanctuary.
incredibly difficult. It's
It's
like I can't
heartbreaking,
imagine.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
Because I
God.
want to save them all, but
Yeah.
again, like we have to balance like the needs and ability of us to take care of the creatures that are here.
Mm-hmm. It's just incredible how you share about it. If anybody wants to kind of learn more or wants to volunteer,
Mhm.
how can they find out more information?
Yeah, so we have a website, onelivingsanctuary.org,
Mm-hmm.
and we are on all the social medias where you can get lots of adorable images of our animals. My animal caretakers take really good pictures of everybody.
Oh wow, yeah.
Um,
Of course
it's very sweet.
I'll tag your social media in the description of this podcast as well, so
Yeah,
people can
yeah,
find
and
it. Yeah.
there is a section on our website that talks about tours and volunteering, so they can go there and
Amazing.
call us if they have more questions.
That's amazing. Faith, thank you so much for sharing so much with us and even of your personal pet loss journey. It's been an honor to hear about hope and to get an insight, a small insight and a glimpse into that beautiful relationship that you shared with Hope, and everything that you've spoken about, I hope can be supportive and brings comfort, and I'm sure people can resonate with. And of course, if people, want to visit One Living Sanctuary or support or just to contact Faith, like all the details will be at the bottom of the podcast. But thank you so much, Faith, for joining me. I've really loved this conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me on your show, Louise.
Okay. Thank you for listening, everybody. And if you did enjoy this episode, just be sure to leave a review or a rating wherever you listen to this podcast. And until next time, take care.